I haven't made it any mystery that I had a tendency to buy MMOs at launch, play them for a few days, and never touch them again. When I first played it, I was a bit disappointed, but after playing for a couple days, I wrapped my head around the mechanics and really got into it. This taught me a valuable lesson about MMOs. First impressions are meaningless. When I see people review MMOs after having only played them for about 3 hours or less, it doesn't really paint a good picture in general. This is why I try to stick it out as long as I can before the next deadline, so I can get as much playtime as possible in a reasonable amount of time, but still leave more than enough gameplay quirks and player experiences to be discovered by those willing to play the game full-time. Long story short, stop telling me that I miss stuff or the game gets better at higher levels. Seriously, watch some of those other videos and see how much they miss. Still, the game didn't hold my interest as much as I'd like, and once again I stopped paying for it, unable to resist the siren's call of the MMO that shall not be named. Alright, I've wasted enough time. This is the MMO Grinder, and it's time to look at Champions Online. You might be wondering why I'm doing Champions Online before DC Universe Online, especially if you remember that Champions was a distant third place behind DCUO, and probably would have been a lot closer if that thing didn't happen. Simply put, I own the game and I know I can run it. Now, let's never speak of that poll again. Released in September 2009, a subscription-based game, Champions Online is the second MMO by Cryptic Studios, the first being City of Heroes. After selling off COH, Cryptic went back into the MMO market by making a game almost exactly like it. Okay, that's not entirely fair. You like storied histories? Here we go. Remember back in the COH review how I mentioned that Cryptic came under fire by Marvel for similarities and ended up in a settlement? Well, in a major twist of irony, Marvel decided to team up with Cryptic to create their own MMO to be published through Microsoft. Even though the game was well underway, Marvel and Microsoft pulled out of the project, afraid that World of Warcraft was going to eat them. This left Cryptic to acquire the license for the pen-and-paper RPG Champions, and the game was retooled around it. Microsoft's cancellation also removed the original intended support of cross-platform gaming, when an intended version of Champions Online was to be ported to the Xbox 360, but was completely cancelled in 2010. Originally published by Atari, this MMO and Star Trek Online was of course sold off to Perfect World, who are currently publishing the game as a free-to-play. So now that the MMO nobody wanted is on Perfect World along with Cryptic's other properties, let's see how well this works out for them. I hope you have a decent video card, as Champions is one of the most notoriously graphics-intensive games. For some odd reason, certain effects seem to have harder times than others, like the cel-shaded effect that you can choose, that will provide a black outline to characters and environments and provide a more hand-drawn style. This game, along with Battlefield 2 back in the day, was one of the few games that forced me into buying a new video card. Well, at least I get to see the purty yet out-of-place looking ice effects now. Lower-powered computers can choose to shut off a lot of these niceties, but the game is a very strange way of handling draw distance for characters. For example, when you're far away from an NPC, they might appear like human outlines, but when you get closer, you suddenly see they're all spike-covered aliens and will come charging after you. It's a bit jarring, so boost the distance if you can handle it. Character designs are a bit nicer looking than City of Heroes, or at least far less doll-like, but honestly, I think I like the look of City of Heroes better as far as characters go. There's something odd about the general character look, and the faces come out looking very strange and occasionally Neanderthal-like. At least you're still given full customization over them, though. I think Champions far excels at environments, as they are much nicer and a lot more varied, with some amazingly atmospheric weather effects in areas. The game features a very interesting take on windowed mode, letting you resize the window to anything you'd like, and the game will calculate the resolution accordingly. It's a really nice touch, especially if you're stuck with a square monitor but want a widescreen view. I love this game's opening theme. That's about it. The theme is probably on par with the original World of Warcraft opening theme as being my all-time favorite opening theme, but it's not exactly cause for playing a game now, is it? Again, like most every 3D MMO ever, it doesn't seem to play all that much, and this game in particular doesn't seem to have that many tracks, so you're probably going to hear a lot of them over and over. They are decent though, and make for a good driving force and wanting to play on occasion. Sound design is handled well. The sounds are similar to City of Heroes, unsurprisingly, as it's a very comic-sounding game, if that even begins to make sense. There are parts where sound helps the game along much better than the music, as a mission called Whiteout has you setting fire to a strange organic mass and, well... yeah. Again, there's nothing groundbreaking here, but it holds together well and gets the job done. Just like Star Trek Online, you can sign up through Perfect World, Steam, or use your old Cryptic account if you still had one. You'll notice you'll get tossed right into the character creator and not to a server list like in City of Heroes. Well, in this game, like in STO, there are no servers, it's all just instant to multiple channels. You can switch your channel by clicking on the button on the top of the minimap if you absolutely need to be on a certain channel to find someone. The first thing you'll see is the archetype screen, where you'll have to choose from a preset list of powers that all function in a basic combat role. There's range damage like fire powers and gun users, melee like sword users, tank classes like ice, and support similar to mages or healers who use magic or mind powers. You can unlock more archetypes by going with a gold membership or paying for them individually. You can also unlock a freeform slot that lets you choose whatever powers you wish. This was the way the game worked before the free-to-play transition. The original idea was not to shoehorn players into a certain archetype, instead allowing them to choose the set of powers they wanted from the get-go. When it went free-to-play, however, they tossed that right out the window. To be honest, I don't think it was entirely a bad thing. Hear me out. Originally, even if the idea was to allow a player to choose from any set of powers they wish, this didn't mean they could just pick whatever powers they liked the best and create a character however they wanted. Instead of creating a character as an archetype, your powers were the archetype. Here's the best example I can give. Originally, I attempted to create my Frost Mage Cyan in the game, and so naturally I picked the ice-based powers and built her like a mage, placing all my points into intelligence. Wrong move! You see, in Champions, Ice is a tanking power. It's not made for attack damage, and it took me forever to wrap my head around why I wasn't causing any real damage output. As even if you've limited yourself to a certain class, you can still use powers from nearly any pool. A COH Blaster class can fire arrows, bullets, electricity, flames, or ice to all the same general effect. It doesn't work that way in Champions. You want to make an ice-based magic user in Champions? Tough. Ice is for tanks, noob. Pick the magic power and turn the spells blue. It's this reason why Champions is so bafflingly limited compared to City of Heroes. Now, remember what I said about the character creator in City of Heroes? No? Well, go watch that. Really, the costume creator is almost identical because there's a few nice changes made, as well as the ability to create asymmetrical costumes or even add a glow effect to your eyes. There's even a few more costume options unlocked, so you don't need to pay for things like wings and capes. You also have many, many, many more sliders to tweak the look of your body and face. In that essence, it's a lot like Star Trek Online, so you're freed up to make the character of your choice, be it a shamefully inaccurate self-insert, a poor facsimile of your WoW character, a blatant pandering reference to a fellow Channel Awesome producer's show, or simply the greatest hero that ever lived.
Hi, Billy Mays here!
Once again, you'll be spending a long while in here trying to get the costume of your choice. Or, like me, you'll hit the randomizer a few times and then tweak the look of the result you like. Yeah, I still don't have any creativity. Again, what do you want from me? So once you start up, you, by default, have the option to do the tutorial, which introduces you to the game's controls and mechanics via a massive alien attack on the populace of Millennium City. You fight through a series of early missions, don't want to enrage anyone now, a series of missions that lead to a final battle that repels the invaders. It's changed a bit from its original run, having a few of the missions cut, but it remains a decent, if not a bit hectic tutorial. Speaking of removed missions, I log back into my old Cryptic account and find out that I have a bunch of missions left over that I haven't finished yet. So I decide, okay, let's at least clear out my log before I continue on with the game, and I start looking for the NPC I need to finish that mission. I can't find him anywhere, so I ask the chat, hey, where's these NPCs located? And they go, well, how long has it been since you last played? Because that mission was removed a long time ago. See, this is why I start new accounts, people. Controls in the game are similar to most 3D MMOs, but there's a lot of options to change them around. Perhaps a remnant of the planned Xbox port is the fact the game immediately recognizes and supports 360 controllers. It works fairly well, believe it or not, but I still felt like tackling this game the old-fashioned way. WASD acts slightly differently than usual by default, making your character strafe from side to side with A and D instead of turning. You can change this up in the options by changing the Champion's Default drop-down menu to read like fantasy MMOs. Another important key to remember is the Shift key, which blocks. Blocking is a fairly important mechanic in the game, as a lot of time you'll be able to see enemies charging up for big attacks, and you'll lessen the damage as well as the effects of the attack by blocking. Powers in the game work as follows. All character archetypes have an energy builder, which works like auto attacks in most MMOs. It's constant light damage, but with an extra twist. In this game, you have an energy bar that works like a mana bar in most fantasy MMOs, and used for more powerful attacks. However, to restore this power, you need to use the energy builder attacks to fill up the bar. After it's full, or at least built up enough for an attack, you can switch to a stronger one. Many powers in the game work more than just pressing a button. For example, it's pretty common a power will need to be charged or held for the best effect. A magic user might have to charge their spell for a more powerful blast, while a gunner might have to hold down the trigger of their machine gun to maintain constant fire. These mechanics give the game a much more action-oriented feel than most MMOs, but it's still a fairly basic concept. The game features a skill-up system that's pretty simple. Every few levels you gain new powers, and you gain a point each level you can use to enhance existing powers. I don't want to dwell on the system for too long for one simple reason. I timed this review very poorly. It seems that coming fairly soon is a skill tree system called Specializations, which is explained in greater detail on the Champions Online site. I can't tell you when this will be implemented, as soon in MMO speak ranges from next week's maintenance period to another several months. Once you're out of the training area, you can head to the powerhouse to obtain your travel power. This was originally the place you needed to head every time you wanted a new power, but it was recently dropped in favor of the latest system. Now all you need to do to get a travel power is to head inside and choose the one you want. The powers in the game act a lot like City of Heroes travel powers, with a few differences, but many of them being more or less the same power with a different coat of paint. A major difference is that the game grants you multiple speeds of the powers from the get-go, and you can even charge some of them up to gain their maximum speed from the get-go. While Flight and Super Speed work almost identically to City of Heroes, Super Jump is vastly different, going from the graceful flight-like leaps of City of Heroes to being a massive flailing leap in Champions, coupled with a loud thud and cracked ground when you land. Teleport has changed vastly from City of Heroes as well, as COH is a targetable direction that needs to be cast, but in Champions it works more like Flight, and you need to activate it every couple seconds when you reappear. Keep an eye on what stats best boost your character's powers, as like I mentioned before when talking about archetypes, they don't work like they do in most MMOs. Even if your suggested stats don't seem like they'd help you, your powers are directly linked to them, so not boosting the right stats will render your powers useless. It's confusing as hell, I know. Luckily, the game is nice enough to let you know what stats are most important to your character by highlighting them in yellow. This proves mostly true in the equipment system. Unlike City Heroes, the game does have a loot and equipment system. Enemies will often drop equipment pieces that will be marked as primary or secondary offense, defense, or utility. You have one slot for each primary and two for each secondary. Keeping these upgraded can be a bit confusing, but it does give that nice extra boost to your stats, so don't neglect them. Again, the stats that matter most to your character will be highlighted in yellow on the equipment piece, so you'll know what's most important to you. Enemies also drop small recovery and buff orbs like health, energy, defense, and offense, so keep an eye out for them in a pinch. There's also a pretty basic monetary system that shows currency units in whatever these are. It's represented by a G, an N, and an L. What's that, gold, nickel, and linoleum? Who cares? I'm calling it gold, silver, and copper. Sue me. You can use the in-game currency to do things like purchase costume changes if you want to tweak your design, or to buy more things in the crafting system. The crafting system sticks with three basic groups: science, arms, and mysticism. From there you can create related items and equipment that can help you along in battle. Parts are obtained by breaking down gear from your specialty, or finding nodes along a map that appear as scrolls on your minimap. For example, an arms crafter might find an ammo crate to loot, while a mysticism crafter will find a skull or an obelisk. Looting nodes also grants buffs to you and your teammates. There's a lack of obvious healing items, but the crafting system can help with that. This does make the game rather easy to die in, as you'll only regenerate health out of combat. The game has a death penalty, but you'd be hard-pressed to notice it. Once you die, you'll respawn at a certain area, but you'll lose a bit of your hero stars, which is a meter on your character portrait. Your character is weakened the less hero stars you have, and you can recover them by grinding enemies without dying again, or purchasing a recovery item in the cash shop. Champions Online levels pretty slowly, and it doesn't really grant much experience. It's not too surprising when you consider the game's level cap is 40. It's not to say the game is grindy, as there's plenty to do, but you'll be seeing a lot of the same area, and that might get grating. Say what you want about City of Heroes, but at least there are a lot of places to look at. One thing that always intrigued me about this game, but I never got to experience, was the Nemesis system. When you reach level 25, you can create a character to face off against your own. The Nemesis system lets you design not only your arch-villain, but the henchman as well. Then the game will occasionally send the henchman after you, and ultimately lead you to a showdown with your designed arch-villain. I so would have had Billy Mays facing off against Vince Shlomi. My last comment might enrage some of the types who take these games seriously, and normally I'd be right there with you if I was looking for a good amount of immersion from a game. As you can tell by Mega G Wolf and my character descriptions here, we play this very stupidly and over the top. So if you want to play some serious superhero game, you might find more goofballs like us than the serious players you would find in City of Heroes. Here's the thing, the game doesn't take itself seriously either. NPCs are constantly spouting movie references, unnatural dialogue, or breaking the fourth wall.
Somebody find a GM and tell him to port me to a different spawn point!
I even remember reading an article mentioning how over-the-top goofy the game gets, and he felt it was a serious detraction. If that sort of thing bothers you, steer clear, but if you like to goof around, you might have a lot of fun in this game. Yes, a major detractor of the game is its inherent goofiness, and you can see that reflected in the community. For every Blood Rage the Deathmancer, there's at least 5 Twinkle Farts, or Princess Stab-You-Deads. The sheer amount of goofy heroes I came across far outweighed the amount in City of Heroes, where that community takes the game far more seriously. This is also a very quiet community, by which I mean they don't seem very active to chat with people, unless they're yelling at each other in zone chat. I did manage to get randomly invited into groups when playing in Millennium City, but we'd gone through nearly 5 quests without saying a single word to each other beside the occasional AFK or BRB. You're not going to find nearly as many helpful people in Champions as you would in City of Heroes, and almost all of them just seem to want to duel request you. One plus I can give is that the game doesn't severely limit you in chat, and you can even speak in zone chat after your character's gained a few levels and been active for a few days. Still, talking in zone chat doesn't often yield results depending on the area you're in. It's unfortunate because the game almost requires cooperation, especially if you're playing certain archetypes. Luckily the sidekicking system is in place here as well, so you're always able to auto-level to match your party members. One interesting factor are the open missions, where you're in a certain area of the map, there's a mission that's constantly going on, and you can help speed it along by performing the objectives. For example, in the starting area of Canada, the base you're on is under constant attack by zombies, and you start by locating specific NPCs, then obtain a scanner which allows you to detect those on the base that have been infected, and finally fight off a massive wave of zombies before the whole encounter resets. At the end of these encounters, there's a score given to each player that participated, and you receive a prize based on your score if you stand on a certain spot in the map. One of the last missions in the training area is an open mission, so you can get a good feel of how they work there. Since the game is one massive instance area, this allows for alternate versions of some areas. For example, the tutorial stage is actually a sectioned off area of Millennium City, and it changes drastically once you complete it. The same goes for areas like the desert and Canada, as both areas are instanced off as smaller versions of themselves until you complete an overarching mission there. Other missions can be instanced in the more traditional sense, like when you're forced to face off against a supervillain in their hideout. There's also comic missions, which are large, multi-phase missions that take place in the same area you're in, but with a vastly different theme and setting. The game's main PvP system comes in the form of arena battles called hero games. These are your basic enter the arena, wait for a queue, and battle it out in the cage matches until the timer ends and one side has more points than the other. It does auto-balance all the characters' levels, but this still suffers from the fact that high-level players will still have access to more powers and better equipment than you will. There's also the dueling system, as I previously mentioned, but I find it baffling that unlike most dueling systems, the loser will actually die and have to respawn. Overall, this community suffers from the same syndrome as a lot of overly popular games. It's not nearly as helpful as the City of Heroes community, so if you really want to play this game, it's best to get some friends together and play it with them. Like STO, this game also uses Cryptic points, which suffer from Microsoft Point syndrome. You can purchase them by converting your Perfect World Zen to Cryptic points with the exchange rate in tow, or you can once again purchase them through Steam Wallet. You know that line in the Star Trek Online review was just a really bad joke, right? It's pretty easy to figure out what Steam Wallet is without much context. To access the cash out, click on the C icon on the minimap, the one with the starburster on it, as if it's screaming at you to click it. The major and foremost purchased option is whether or not to go to a gold account. Once again, this is a free-to-play subscription hybrid, so a lot of the stuff in the cash out becomes free if you decide to subscribe. Here's a kicker, though. Characters you created on your gold account become locked once you stop paying for it. The original free-to-play conversion allowed you to take a couple existing gold account characters and convert them to silver archetypes, because all the original characters were what now is considered freeform. It's just something to be aware of if you want to go gold. Gold accounts also have a lot of perks that were available for free to City of Heroes players, like the ability to customize the color and look of your powers. It's an ability I seriously miss, and it baffles me why they would remove it from the free-to-play model, as it's sure as shit not worth subscribing for. Without that option on the table, you're forced to pay for each nicety on its own. You'll notice a lot of costume pieces under lock and key during character creation, so if there's a certain piece you can't live without, you're gonna have to pay for it. Keep in mind the same goes for a lot of the travel powers, but there are quite a few that aren't merely new coats of paint on an existing power, such as swinging or tunneling. You're limited to 2 character slots on a silver account, but you can purchase more slots if you so desire. You can also purchase adventure packs, which are similar to comic missions. I find it a bit jerkish to have the game offer you a quest in one of the adventure packs, only to tell you have to pay for it to complete it. It at least gives you some new places to explore, I guess. The real FU to the players is the removal of your alternate bag slots. Originally you had access to all 4, as early crafted bags only gave you 4 slots, but now you have to spend 200 Cryptic points to unlock a single slot. Call me crazy, but I don't think it's worth the potential extra 4 to 8 inventory slots. Maybe later when you get larger bags, but starting out, no. Okay, I know what you're all thinking. Which game is better, Champions Online or City of Heroes? Well, you should know I don't have an answer for that, as I can't speak for you. Overall, I find Champions a bit unremarkable, and it's a game that almost requires more people to enjoy, and it's very rooted in class structure despite its original intention. Here's my final rating. If you want a game that relies more on timing and positioning rather than just spamming your powers, this game does deliver on that front. The game looks and feels very lighthearted more often than not, so if you're more into comics in the goofy sense, or just looking to have fun, this might be a better match for you. While there are generally less areas to explore in this game, a lot of the time they're very interesting and colorful, so you're not just stuck with several different looking cityscapes. If you didn't like City of Heroes for one reason or another, but still want to play a Superhero MMO, this might be a good option. The main decision is whether or not to go gold. A lot of the perks are unlocked with a gold account, but just remember they'll be relocked as soon as you stop paying. To keep things with you permanently, consider unlocking more archetypes or costume pieces to give you more variety for characters down the road. The new travel powers can be fun and interesting and might be more ideal for your character, so make sure to take a good look at them when you first check them out, and see if dropping a bit more cash on a desired one might make all the difference. If you prefer maturity and immersive games, this isn't one. The game clearly doesn't take itself too seriously, and you might be put off by that. The community can be equally goofy, and besides being argumentative in zone chat, spend most of the time minding their own business rather than talking. This game is painfully graphics intensive, so running it on an old machine, or even a newer one with an unpreferred video card, might cause you issues. This game might be too similar to City of Heroes for some people, making them realize they could just be playing City of Heroes instead, so more power to them. Champions might not blow you away with its differences, and in that case I wouldn't bother with a download if you're already an avid COH player. Next time, I'm sticking around the world of cell shading with a lesser-known game that's one of my favorite MMO subgenres.
Whether you're cutting cars or working on home improvements, the dual saw is the one tool you won't want to be without. That's the power and the precision of the dual saw.
So, how many of you are mad that I kept referencing City of Heroes in a game that's a lot like it? None of you? That's interesting.